What is up, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of my College Athletics Big Sis series. I believe we are on episode 3. Now, today's episode is really, really special to me because I am welcoming my very, very first guest. Now, my intention for this show is to be constantly bringing on guests and constantly bringing in different perspectives and different topics and things like that. So today is where we get it all started. And today's topic is going to be what it's like transitioning out of a sport that you've done for your entire life. And so joining me today is my best friend, Danielle Conover. We've known each other since the 4th grade. We went to 4th grade together. And then we went to 4th grade together and then kind of parted ways a little bit, but then we both ended up back in the state of Florida for college and we reunited. We've been inseparable ever since, despite the fact that we live 4 states away. So today's discussion is going to have to be remote, but I'm really, really excited to get into it. But I'm really excited to get into it and just kind of discuss with her experiences versus my experiences and what we believe the takeaways should be for athletes that are currently in the middle of college athletics thinking it's never going to end, or athletes that might be on the very tail end of it wondering how they're going to come to terms with it, or girls that are just in our shoes that are like on a day-to-day basis trying to figure out what your new life is going to look like without that sport that you've done for so long. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Okay, we are officially recording. Everybody, like I said, we're going to be talking about the transition out of college athletics and into the real world and just coming to terms with being an ARP. So, like I said, this is my best friend, Danielle. Everybody say hi to Danielle.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. And honestly, for those watching, like this has been something that we have literally talked about for a year and a half. Like the fact that we're actually sitting here today, like starting this is like huge for us. And I know nobody's going to like understand.
No, not for us, for Katie. Katie
stop.
Katie's dream, and it is coming true, guys. She's amazing.
It is not. This is both of us. Do not listen to her. This is both of us. Every single time we get on the phone, she's like, oh my God, that was so good. Like we need to have a podcast. Like literally we'll get done with a spiel and I'm like, oh my God, what if somebody had recorded that? That would have been insane. Right? So anyways.
Constantly mic'd.
I digress. We have like a million ideas on things to talk about, but we wanted to kind of start simple today, like I said, and just discuss just the transition out of college athletics. So I think I'm going to have Danielle go first and just kind of talk me through like her experiences and what that transition has been like, because she's actually been out of sports a little bit longer than I have. So I'm going to pass the baton over to you.
Yes. Okay. So I'll start out. Katie knows all of this, so I feel bad explaining it all over again. But just to keep things short, I've been playing volleyball since I was 9 or 10, and then indoor. And then I would say I started playing beach volleyball when I was around 16. But both of us growing up in Northern Virginia, that was kind of a really hard scene to get into. Beach volleyball isn't really super popular there. We used to like go play inside an old warehouse with sand thrown on the ground. So just super grateful that I had that opportunity up in Virginia. And then obviously to travel, we would go like play in Florida, play in California. So I graduated high school in 2019 as well. And then went to go play beach volleyball at the University of Tampa, which is super cool, especially at that time because there's not that many schools really that have beach volleyball. So Tampa is Division II. We dabble in a few Division Is, which is super cool as well. And coming up to date, there actually are a lot of cool Division I schools that have beach volleyball now, such as Oregon. So that's super cool. But so yeah, I started there in the fall of 2019. I decided to go there because I was originally pursuing nursing. Tampa has a great nursing program. So I was like, I'm going to get to do both. I'm going to play volleyball. I toured the campus there and I was just like, this is exactly where I want to be. It was beautiful. It was really far away from home, but I was just like, I feel like God's leading me here. Like, I'm just going to go for it. So went there. I started there in 2019. Loved it. That first year was definitely rough, and that's a story for another time.
Another episode, if you will.
Really, I was just thinking about this a moment ago. There are just like so many positive experiences that I had there. An amazing head coach, Jeff Lamb, love him. Amazing teammates. I just remember like being there from the get-go and like our roster is super big, so we carry only about 12 girls play at once, but we double that. So I would say we had about 25. So just a big group of girls, but so with so many of them being older, and even in grad school at that point, it was so just inspirational to me to meet so many girls that were older than me and just had such a big impact on me at that time. So I was there for a little bit. Things didn't necessarily go to plan. So I apply. This is again into something else a little bit differently, but with nursing schools, there's like different applications. So like some nursing schools start when you're a freshman, some start like with a delayed start as a sophomore. So at Tampa, you start your second year. And so I did not get accepted into their nursing program, but had like taken all of the requirements. So I was kind of in a tough spot where I was like, I really want to stay and keep playing volleyball, but like nursing has always been my dream. So I ended up graduating from the University of Tampa in the fall of 2021. It's my Bachelor of Science, Allied Health, and then I ended up concentrating in occupational therapy. That was just kind of my major that I switched to because it had a lot of similarities from nursing. I'm glad I stayed. I am glad I graduated early, but that spring, so the spring of 2021 was when we won the ABCA Small Championship Division II National Championship, which super cool. That's like our championship that we go to, and we ended up winning it that year. And again, that was my last year there, so that was super cool. So glad I got to be a part of that. Obviously a God thing. So that was super cool. Ended up graduating, and then I was like, okay, nursing is still in my heart. Like God put this dream on my heart. I'm still gonna go for it. And then to kind of continue that sport, I found down in Sarasota a 2-year school, State College of Florida. They had a 2-year nursing program. I was there for a little bit, and then I got there and I was like, okay, like I'm going to play, or I was like, I'm just going to do nursing. Like, it's going to be fine. My sports days are over. And I remember sitting there and God nudging me towards volleyball again. And I ended up reaching out to their head coach, Lynn Burnett, and ended up playing another year of NJCAA volleyball, JUCO ball, which is great. That it doesn't usually go in that order.
It's a little backwards.
Yeah. So then I started there the spring of 2022, and that spring we won the JUCO beach volleyball national championship as well. So kind of a cool twist on divisions and just like volleyball, and it's so cool to see the difference between the two. Again, I was just thinking about earlier, at SCF, I got to have 2 female head coaches, Lynn Burnett and Bree Scarborough, 2 of like the best coaches I've ever had ever. So it was definitely just a God thing. And so I'm so blessed to have like tried both of those divisions and gotten to like pursue my dream. I'm still actively pursuing nursing elsewhere. So got that in the works. It's in the mixing pot still. So but yeah, that's kind of just the brief, not really brief, but brief summary of sports for me.
Wow. Isn't that crazy, you guys? Her journey was just absolutely insane. It was kind of funny the way that like our journeys overlap too, because like I said, like we went to 4th grade together. We, were friends from like pretty much 4th grade on, but from like 2015 to like, was it 2022? Like we just like didn't interact. Like we were both in the state of Florida going to school, and we like finally reunited in 2021. Yeah. And then, or 2022, but I'll get into that in a sec. But it's just kind of cool to just like we were kind of going through these journeys like in tandem, but it's so funny. Like before I get into mine, just kind of how similar everything is, and how you like you go through like what you think will be like a natural progression towards an end. And then like, there's a lot of roadblocks and there's all these things that kind of get in your way. And so, it's so different, but so similar at the same time. So let me tell you guys a little bit of what I dealt with. I was a swimmer. I swam from the time that I was 4 or 5 years old. My mom was a coach, and so that was something that I always wanted to do. And, swam up through high school in the Northern Virginia area. Like Danielle said, we both grew up there. And my junior year of high school, I actually committed to North Carolina State. And it was a weird, like commitment process, because it was like in between some rule changes. And so there was a lot of pressure my junior year to like decide super, super quick. And I don't think that I necessarily thought that decision out fully because I think that there was some pressure from some other schools that I was still dealing with. But I digress. I ended up going to NC State and I was there for a year and it was not the right place for me. Like without getting into a lot of the details, it was not the right place, not the right coaches, just not the right environment. And then COVID happened. And so then I go home and, you know, after 4 or 5 months of COVID, I then decided to transfer to the University of Florida, which was an incredible experience. I have nothing but amazing things to say about UF, and it kills me that we were 2 hours away from each other for a solid 2 years before we reunited, but I digress. But UF was an incredible experience. There, like everything, like there were a lot of highs and there were a lot of lows. Like, you know, if you're going through college athletics right now and you're listening to our stories, like do not mince words because we went through it. Like the highest highs and the lowest lows, you know, like we went through everything that, you know, college athletics had to offer. And there were really, really hard moments. And we'll get into some more of those in a little bit, but Florida was fantastic. Biggest highlight was probably winning SECs when I was a senior. That was something that we had just talked about and worked so hard towards like my entire time we were at Florida, and everything finally clicked when I was a senior. But that was just absolutely incredible. And so I had intended on doing my COVID 5th year at Florida, and I graduated in May of 2023, and that just didn't work out the way that it did, right? And so I ended up transferring to the University of Tennessee and doing my COVID 5th year at Tennessee, which honestly at the time was such a good call because my entire life up until that point had been swimming. Like I was not thinking past swimming. I was not thinking like, oh, like what am I going to do after this? Like who am I going to be after swimming? And I think going to Tennessee, even though it wasn't the exact experience that I wanted it to be athletically, it gave me the time and space to really explore what I wanted to do beyond that. So like my master's degree in journalism was fantastic. Like I am so blessed to have, you know, basically gone to another program, gotten an entire master's degree paid for at 22 and 23. I mean, like I think about that now and I'm like, wow, like what a blessing that was, because I know people that are older than me going back to do their master's. So that's just an incredible blessing to be done with school at, you know, at 23. Danielle will tell you, she's like, God, I wish I was done.
I know, I'm like so close, but it's fine. I love that for you.
Different paths. This is what I'm saying, guys, different paths. But yeah, so I graduated in May, and like one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in like the last 6 to 8 months of like being done with sports is like not having experience, like literally just, you know, trying to apply for all of these jobs and things and just not having experience to do these things and feeling like my resume has like nothing on it because my only experience was swimming, was college athletics. But Danielle, why don't you talk to me a little bit about like your work experience and like what that transition has kind of looked like for you out of athletics and still in school?
Oh gosh. Well, literally during high school, it didn't work. Again,
right, same.
super blessed with an amazing family and parents, and just been blessed in so many ways, but with playing travel sports and having practices multiple times a week and then traveling on the weekends, there was just no way that I could physically commit to another job. So there was no experience. And I feel again, we have like two different fields here going on. So like journalism is totally different than the medical field, right? Because like medical is, you have to
know the stuff. Yeah. Education.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you do for that too, but it's just different because there's like the whole creative side of it, or like it matters who you know, right?
Right.
So with medical, it doesn't really matter. Like you could be like, oh, I know that doctor, and they could be like, okay.
Yeah. Right.
Like, so
exactly.
I really didn't start. I think when I moved to Sarasota, I worked here and there, like assisted livings. I tried to do some like CNA, which is like certified nursing assistant, so it's like underneath a nurse work and stuff like that. I worked at pizza place.
Paisanos.
Shout out Paisanos. There's one in Gainesville, there's one in Sarasota. I I really like did not have much work experience, and now like being in nursing school still, our experience truly is like the clinical time that we have and
Right.
the clinical locations that we get to go through, which we again experience through school. I just feel like it really resonates with me what you just said, because like my resume is truly blank, and like that's hard going into an employer because my entire character and foundation of who I am as a person was built by sports. But how do I show that?
Right.
Because it's like I've gained this, I've gained communication and determination and
Right.
empathy and integrity and all of that from sports, like completely changed me as a person. But all I have to show for that is like travel sports and like here's who I played for. So I definitely feel like that's super tough, like going into the adult world, because you're like, I put all of this like 10 plus years into sports, but then it's like, what do I have to show for that? So I do feel
Right.
it's a little tough, but yeah, I worked here and there, but nothing.
Well, and I feel like another piece of everything that you just said is just feeling like coming out of sports and like having to restart the process of getting good at things. Like when I came out of sports, like I had been a swimmer my entire life. Like I knew what I was good at. I knew what my strengths were. Like, I played off of those all the time. Like I knew what my strengths were, like as a leader, as a person on the team, as a teammate. And then I come out of sports and I'm like all of a sudden not good at anything anymore because I'm not an athlete. And so like I stepped into like photography and like social media and video and like all this
You're
stuff.
so
And
good at.
okay. It's been a long 8 months, but like I stepped into it in April and May and I was like I felt so bad asking for help because I like was not good at something for the first time in like ever, and like this is something that I'm like now putting all of my time towards and I'm like I'm not good at this. But
Well,
it's
you
but
are.
but it was a huge learning curve, right? And so it's like it's weird. My point is it's weird having to start from ground zero because like when you're an athlete, it's like, okay, at least I'm here. And then I get to go from here to here and then here to here. And you're like constantly building on top of things. Like it's been like decades since we were at ground zero starting trying.
Trying something new for the very first time. Yes.
Exactly.
And that's like, I feel that in nursing all the time too, is that like feel the fear of failure, because it's like, oh, like I need to go practice an IV, but that's really scary. Like I haven't done something new for the first time since I was like 10. Like
Right.
that's crazy. Like I don't even remember the feeling of that anymore. So like pushing myself to like go try something new. Like I remember my last year at Tampa, I was not taking very serious classes anymore. And so I literally tapped into art and not know that I'm not really an artistic person, but like I just started like painting and like doing artistic stuff and like my wood burning stuff. And
Yeah.
it's
Best Christmas present. Hang on. Best Christmas present I've ever gotten. Cutest Christmas present I've ever gotten. She's so creative and artsy. Anyways, I digress. Go ahead.
for wedding gifts, let me know. But yeah, it's crazy because I'm like, there's a whole other side of my brain that I haven't tapped into, is the artistic versus like math side, and
Right.
I use my science brain all the time, but there's a complete other side of my brain, like you said, I'm literally having to like rewire my head and try new things
Right.
for the first time. But I feel like it's really important because that's gotta like keep you young. Trying things for the first time over.
For sure. For sure. And the other thing that I feel like too, like, and I have to like constantly remind myself of this, just like in terms of like the journalism and stuff, and like all of the women that like I look up to, like Alyssa Lang and Holly Rowe is 58. Like she is like at the pinnacle of like whatever, and she's 58,
Yes.
and like Alyssa Lang, like they're in their 30s. Like we are 23 and 24. And I like have to sit and remind myself like on a daily basis, like, okay, like, yeah, I have to start from ground zero on something new, but like so much, like I'm 6 or 7 years away from being 30. Like so many things can happen in 6 or 7 years, and 30 is still considered like stupidly young, So
Sure.
like we have so much time to learn and grow and like change, like, and I like it sucks, and I like we'll probably get into this more like in another episode, but like social media and just how it impacts you, and like when you're looking at things, like especially for me working in social media because I'm on it all the time, and it drives me nuts when I'm like scrolling through and it's like so and so has gotten engaged and so got promoted, and I was just like, oh my god, I feel so behind. But you're not really behind, like
No. And that's the facade of social media and society and everything. And I wrote this down in my notes. I started ranting, but like with God, like there is no behind. Like there's no, like I'm not comparing my race to someone else's race, or
Right.
like passing the water station and I'm never going to get water again and I just got to keep running this race. It's like, no,
Right.
I'm running my own race. I can't compare it to Katie's race or anyone else's race. It's the race that God set out for my life. And if I'm walking with him, like I'm never going to be behind. So
Right.
Right. And also, like, kind of to the point of exactly what you just said, I want to switch gears a little bit and just talk about like how you come to terms with not accomplishing everything that you hope to or expected to accomplish in your athletics career. Because I know, like, I remember being like 12, 13, 14 years old, like looking at certain people like ahead of me and being like, oh, well, I'm going to get there someday, you know, oh, I'm going to like do this, or oh, I'm going to do that. And like, unfortunately, I ended my career with, you know, goals that I didn't accomplish. But I feel like that happens to everybody. Like the whole point of goals is just to constantly have something out in front of you to shoot for, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to ultimately achieve that. And so as I was kind of stepping out of swimming, I was like trying to come to terms with like, oh man, you know, I didn't end on the high note that I wanted to, or I didn't accomplish X, Y, and Z goal. And I remember having a conversation with my friend Talia, who honestly was such a blessing throughout this whole year. Talia will actually be on the show at some point. But we were kind of going through like the COVID fifth year thing, like side by side. She was at Miami, I was at Tennessee. And so we were constantly talking and just, you know, having conversations of like, hey, like, I'm kind of feeling like this. Like, what are you feeling? You know, just all of these emotions that came with like coming towards the end. And I remember saying to her at one point, like, hey, like, we cannot get so caught up in the end because the finish line is not the journey. Like the journey is the journey. And like the journey, you know, far outweighs the teeny little moment at the end, you know, and it doesn't really matter if you know, stumble a little at the finish line because you're tired and because you've done it for so long. What matters is the journey and all of those highs and lows that you accumulated and everything that you learned. And so I've tried to come to terms with that. But you know, it's hard because it's something that you did for so long, you know, and you like wanted to be the best and you wanted to, you know, work your butt off and get to X, Y, and Z. And, you know, it is hard coming to terms with that, you know?
no, for sure. I wrote down in my notes, sorry, and I'm like flipping back and forth, but one of the things that I made a note of, and I remember, like, I vividly remember feeling this way, like sitting at Tampa and being like, okay, like, God's closing this door. Like, everyone always says that, like, oh, like, God's closing this door. Like, I just have to wait for God to open this door. And for me, it just felt like all of a sudden that, like, all the doors were closing. And that I was just sitting there. And I don't know if this is original, and I don't even know if I coined this term, but I wrote it down as like waiting in the hallway. And I think that that's so powerful because we're always just waiting, like, oh, like God's closing that door. Like, let me just wait for him to open another. And I'm just like waiting for more opportunities. And I know that God does reveal new opportunities. But for me, I did feel like I was waiting in the hallway. Like, doors were closed behind me and I was still waiting for doors to open in front of me. But in that moment, I was just waiting with God and we were in the hallway. And I'm very vivid. So like to me, that was just perfect because I'm like, I can like literally see myself sitting down on the floor in the hallway. But there's such peace in knowing that like God's not like I don't necessarily see God moving right now, and I understand that things are closing behind me and not necessarily opening up in front of me, but just that peace in knowing that like God is with you in the waiting, just like when he's with you when things are moving. So I feel like that's super important too. And I think I wrote something else down. But yeah, that I would just say that was like the main thing that stuck with me because especially through school, like I didn't really have super high expectations with sports going into Tampa just because it was, you know, smaller school, super big roster. I wasn't one of the best players. I just love to play volleyball and I'm a good team player and like loved everyone. So I didn't have like super high expectations. I was just happy to be there. And I would say my expectations were more like on the educational side. And so when things like didn't go my way with that, and I still feel that to this day, it's just like I tried nursing here and that didn't work. And I tried nursing there and it didn't work. And I got to the point, I remember talking about this with my mom, but I was just like, how do I know when God is saying no versus how do I know when God is like testing me to see if I trust him? And I still feel that today. So I don't feel like I necessarily have a full answer to that, but I know that, and I wrote this down. I said, don't give up on the dream that God put on your heart. Just know that you're going to have to go there with him. And that means a lot to me because like God did put volleyball on my heart and obviously I got to do that, but more importantly, he put nursing on my heart. And I haven't given up on that yet. I'm not done yet, but I do think that I've had to trust him through like these things that haven't necessarily gone my way. And I'm writing a whole another thing about this for when I finally finish school and I want to talk about nursing. But I wrote in my notes the other day that like nursing was never the calling. And I see that all the time. I see girls all the time on nursing and I'm so proud of them because so many of them were with me at Tampa and then they also like diverted and went somewhere else and did nursing somewhere else and they're graduating. And I'm so happy for them. And I see people all this time say like, God put this calling on my life, like God put the nursing call on my life. And I think that that's super cool. But for me, the call was never nursing. The call was to be God's hands and feet. And once I accepted that, that was when things started to change for me, truly, because it wasn't me sitting over here being like, I have to be a nurse. I have to do this. I have to meet people. I took my hands off of it and I tried to really just be where God had me. And I started doing better. My stress levels were slightly lower. And you know what? I started to encounter God at the hospital through people, which is crazy. And that's like the whole point. And I'll get off my soapbox now, but yeah, don't give up on the dream that God put on your heart because like you're saying, like we go in with these expectations and God's plan is different than our plan. And we just have to learn to roll with that, I guess. So that was a lot. Sorry.
No, honestly, that was the perfect segue into what I was going to go into next, which is just kind of dealing with the expectations that you have going into school and stuff, because like she just said, like, you know, God's plans will, you know, most of the time not meet your expectations. And we're going to have a whole episode on this, but I did want to start right here.
I know, you know, the other episode.
Yeah. She's going to be on a whole bunch, like buckle your seatbelts, but just dealing with the expectations of like dating and stuff like that. Because I think us at 18 and 19, we're like, okay, great. You know, we're going to school. We're going to meet our husbands. We're going to be married by the time we're 24 and 25. As a 23-year-old woman who has almost been out of school a year, Danielle will verify this. You are most likely not going to meet your husband in college unless you guys were like childhood sweethearts or like, you know, there was some outstanding thing. You are not going to meet your husband in college. And we say this because you need to get rid of that expectation. That expectation is going to, you know, just hinder you in being able to just enjoy college and just enjoy all of the experiences that things have to offer. And I'm not saying like go out and party and hook up and whatnot, but if you're constantly looking and trying to hang on to, you know, like, oh, I need this or, oh, I need that. And this can apply to anything except, you know, like anything as well as dating, you know, like if you're really searching for something and you're really holding on to something, you're not going to find it. Like that's the thing that like makes me roll my eyes the most. But when you hold on to things and you go after them really hard, you're not going to find them. It's only when you let go that, you know, they'll like fall in your lap. And so we'll get into that more, but like, you know, it just really applies to like goal setting. You know, it applies to like, okay, like I really, really want to do this. Like I struggle with, you know, anxiety and like, you know, like race related, you know, like mental issues for a long time. And it was because I was holding so tightly onto things, you know? And so just kind of dealing with like, you know, the expectations that I had in a lot of aspects of my life versus kind of where I am now, where I kind of feel like I'm in like an in-between phase. And Danielle, you know, I know feels a lot like this. Like it, you know, it feels like, a waiting season, but it's not. Like it's a growth season, you know, and it feels like, you know, nothing's happening, like she was saying. But like there is so much going on, and like we're never going to be this age ever again. Like there's so much freedom and there's so much joy that comes with being in this like weird little in-between phase that I think people miss out on a lot of times because they're like, oh, I'm in a waiting season. I'm waiting for my husband. I'm waiting for this. I'm waiting for that, you know? And just like coming to terms with like, okay, like God is working, and I like there's so much joy to be found. Like there's so much fun to be had in this phase of life where we feel like nothing's happening, you know?
So true. And I think too, like, you put so much more stress on yourself when you're like, okay, like I have to do this, or I have to do, like, I'm putting the expectations on myself. Like God doesn't expect me to do this entire laundry list of things. He expects me to honor him and live according to what he said in his word, things like that. But he, like, the things that I have planned are not the things that he has planned. Like I just looked back at my notes and I was like, I want to go to college and graduate in 4 years. Didn't happen. I want to do nursing at Tampa and do all these. Didn't happen. I want to do this. Didn't happen. Like everything that I planned for myself literally didn't happen. And that, like, thank the praise God, because it didn't, you know? And I just think we put so much pressure on ourselves. And I do this to myself all the time, just unrealistic expectations. But like in reality, like I'm doing that to myself. That's not anyone else. I just need to, like you're saying, like use the season. Like it's not waiting. Like I'm growing. Like we're literally going to look back at this one day and be like 30. And I'm going to be like, I had so much time. Like I was literally growing as a person and I didn't even realize it. Like
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely. I know. It's just crazy to think about like how much is actually going on and how much life we've lived and how much life has yet to be lived, because I think we come out of it and we're like, oh my God, college is over, and like my childhood is over, like, you know, like me being, you know, kind of dependent is over, but like there's so much more unknown. Like that's the thing that I'm dealing with is like when I was swimming, like it was a year in, year out. Like I knew exactly where I was going to be every single day. Like I knew that I'd have my 3 weeks off in August, but like other than that, like I'm swimming year round. And so like now it's like I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. Like, you know, like the number of times I've gotten a call and it's like, oh, hey, like we're gonna have you fly to Nashville in 2 weeks, or like fly here. And it's like I could not like that's just such a blessing as it is, you know, being able to go do things like that for work. But like just the not knowing like what is coming on a daily basis is like so cool, but like so scary at the same time, you know?
Yep.
I don't know.
And I wrote this down as well. I just looked at it, but like I feel like that's the whole concept of like blind faith, is like trusting God that like, okay, like I don't really know what 2025 is gonna look like at all, but like I just trust that it's gonna be God's plan and that it's gonna be good. I just had a thought completely leave my head, but no, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think that you said something earlier, and I think this is such a good point too to bring back up, is just the like when you're in it, you don't realize the like I want to do everything. I want to say yes to everything. You don't do that because like I feel like when I was at school, like I was so in the middle of everything. I was like, I got to do school. I got to go to sleep because I have to wake up for a lift. Like I have to run, you know, like you don't realize like you're missing out on some of the best things. And so I would say that would be like, if I could go back and change like one thing, I totally agree with what you said, because like I wish I could say yes to everything, or I'm like, I wish I could be back in a dorm like one more day, you know, or like go to practice one more time, like stupid stuff like that. But it's like I want to say yes, and I remind myself of that now because I'm even still doing that now. It's like saying yes to the things that might not be available to me later in life.
Absolutely. And that was a good segue into our next like kind of like discussion, which is just what advice would you give to somebody who's either in the middle of it right now and just struggling with the day in and day out grind of college athletics, somebody who's getting closer to the end and isn't sure how to, you know, come to terms with it, or even people that are like in our shoes and are freshly out of it and are like, what do I do with my life? Do you want to start?
Sure. I feel like to do like the 3 segments. I feel like it would be cool to touch on like if you're considering going to college, if you're in it, or if you're after it. I feel like if you're someone who's like considering college athletics at any level, right? We touched on like all divisions here. I feel like I would say 100% yes. And I know you would agree with me. Yes, I 100%. And I know it's so hard with travel. Travel sports is expensive. You know, it depends on where you live. Sometimes there's different variables like that. And I do feel like travel sports obviously sets you up to get seen by schools and all of that. So there's a little bit of that dynamic with opportunity and such. But if you have the opportunity to go for it, I would say go. Do you have any comment on that before we move to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. I say get into it. And when you get into it, recognize that it's a privilege, not not something that you have to do. Like if you don't want to do it, take yourself out. Like go enjoy something else because life is way too short. I mean, I have known many, many, many people that were so incredibly talented throughout high school, went and committed to, D1, D2 school, swam for a year and were like, yeah, this isn't for me. And then go off and do something else. And like at the time when I was going through it, I was like, man, like, they were so talented. They had so much to give to this sport. Why didn't they just stick with it? But it just wasn't bringing them joy. Like it was not a dream that was on their heart. And so if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Don't put yourself through the pain.
College is fun without it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you can and you can enjoy it and you can pursue other interests. I mean, there was one girl that I grew up swimming with. She was so incredibly talented. And I think she ended up retiring after maybe her sophomore year. And now she lives in Wilmington and has her own like beachwear shop. And she like surfs and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing. But it's like so her. Like I look at that and I'm like, you know what? I'm proud of you because you went after exactly, what you wanted and you were true to yourself, So do that. But also when you're in the midst of it, you have to be grateful. You have to find a way to come to terms with the hard moments because you chose it, and college athletics is not easy. It's not all like, oh, you get to walk around in your gear and like flex on all the narps. Like it is that.
There were days when I couldn't even walk.
Right.
Well,
there's some days, like some days you can't even walk around and flex because you can't walk, right?
I literally couldn't walk down the stairs. No, and I know you did a little segment on like being grateful in the moment, and like I know you said too, like when you're in the middle of it, I know that that's so hard, but just remember, like God doesn't send you somewhere alone. Like He's always going to be with you there, and it's always for a reason too. Like any life experience we ever have, it's always for a reason. And I know it's so easy to sit here and say that because we're out of it, but just know that yeah, it's all for a reason.
Absolutely. Now, what would you say to somebody who's in the middle of it and is getting closer to the end, and not sure how to come to terms with that?
I would just say that, sports is like truly the best thing that ever happened to me. Again, it changed me as a person. Like I couldn't have been able to do it without my family. There's so many aspects to it, but I just feel like the moment that I really like clicked it all together for me was when I was living down in Sarasota. I finished at SCF and I went back and started coaching with one of my old coaches, Bree Scarborough, best woman to ever grace this earth. And she started coaching at one of the high school beach volleyball teams, which so cool. I didn't have high school beach volleyball. It's like literally one of their varsity sports.
Wow.
So cool. Like you can let her in beach volleyball. So I started helping out with her practices and coaching. And for me, that was the moment that it just all clicked because I fell in love with coaching, but it made me realize that's when you know you're old, first of all, is when you're literally coaching. But it makes you put it all into perspective because I'm sitting there and I remember playing volleyball when I was 13 years old in my first travel team. And I was so nervous and just like, it really just put it into all perspective. I'm like, there is no way that I wanted to build my character than through sports or make friends through sports or have life experiences.
Right.
So that wasn't really answering your question. But
right.
I just feel like sports and the coaching thing really just put it all together for me. And it just made me who I am as a person. And if you're in the middle of it, just keep going and know that God's got you because He's never going to put you somewhere where He's not there with you. He's in the trenches with you.
Period.
You're the shovel. Just keep digging.
I have two thoughts about this one, just to kind of consolidate what she was talking about. And like the first thing is like nothing is ever that serious. Like I remember so many moments when I was in the middle of it, and like I took so many things personally, and so many like, like it is hard, but like there is no reason to take it that seriously, and I think that was one of the things that, to my own detriment, because I was so in my head sometimes, like nothing is ever that serious, and it's kind of funny, like to Danielle's point, like I started working in baseball this past summer, and I remember, traveling around with this high school baseball team, and it's like 30 of the best high school baseball players in the country, on this team, and just listening to them talk, and and like obviously it's boys, and obviously it's a completely different sport, but just listening to them like be so stressed about, oh my God, like my velo, like, I didn't like hit 95 today, or, oh, this pitch isn't feeling right, or like what the heck is wrong with my bat, just things like that. Like it is never that serious. It's not that serious. Okay. Like you got to take a step back, go outside, touch some grass, because it is not that serious. It is just a sport. And like Danielle, I'm sure you can like talk about this in terms of volleyball. Like my sport is literally like how fast somebody like paddles through the water. Okay. Like when you like reduce it to that, like it's so dumb. And like baseball, it's like how well a guy can like, take a stick to a ball. Like be so for real. It's
volleyball
like
is literally like keep the balloon off the ground.
That's exactly right. Like it's not that serious, it's not your entire self-worth, and like we're not gonna lie to you. Like it coming out of it is going to be hard. Like you are going to have identity issues, because your entire life and your all of your friends and things like that, that's another thing that you're going to realize, is that like who are your real friends, because like your circle gets really, really small when you walk out of sports, because all of a sudden it goes from being 25 to 30 people that you're surrounded with on a daily basis that you think are your friends, to 3, 4, maybe 5 people max that you keep in touch with. And that's okay. Like you were not meant to have 25 to 30 people in your close circle. But like I said,
You just had 12.
Period. But like at the end of the day, like I said, it's not that serious. You're gonna be okay, and there will be tears along the way. I've had quite a few of those. There will be very nostalgic moments, but you're gonna be okay, I promise.
Ditto.
Period. What would you say to people that are our age, kind of going through it as well?
I would say that I'm seeing a lot of the girls that I played with, they're like getting into like adult leagues and like grass leagues and like playing adult stuff, which I think is so, and I need to get into that, because I like volleyball is, and I can't speak for swimming obviously, but volleyball is really one of those like lifelong sports. Like literally you can play in adult leagues until you can't walk.
Right.
Like, so I definitely need to get involved in that. And then just like coaching, like I said, that just like had such an impact on me. And just finding a way to give back, because we all have so much knowledge in our head. And these girls that are like 13, 14, 15, I went out there and like they wanted to do everything that I did. And they were just like soaking up everything that I said. And I was like, it was literally me. And I remember being that age and having the college age girls there, and I was just like, oh my gosh, they're so cool. Like, Mom, can you take a picture of us? Like,
right.
I remember thinking that they were the coolest thing. So I feel like giving back, that's just like such a way to like cope with that transition of the age moving on. So I would say that, and really just like finding other things that you enjoy besides, I like Katie's talked about. She's an amazing photographer. And like I talked about art. So there's just like so many other talents and gifts that God has blessed us with. So like tapping into those, really, I would say.
Absolutely. And then also finding other ways to give back, because like Danielle said, like she wants to be involved in volleyball, and she still wants to continue to be a part of that community and giving back to the actual volleyball side of things. But if you're not in a place where you're ready to be connected with your athletic community, like if you still need space, that's okay too. Like I have taken an ample amount of space in the last 8 months. I mean, I stepped out of a pool in February at the SEC Swimming Diving Champs, and I have not looked at a pool since then. Literally not even put eyes on a swimming pool, okay? And that's okay too. Like, if you need that time, like, that's completely and totally fine. And so that's kind of why we're here, because I do want to give back. I do want to be able to help, but I'm not quite ready to step back into the swimming realm yet. And that's okay. Like, if you're not, like, if you're, no matter where, like, how your exit from your sport was, it's okay. And if you want to give back, just, you got to be creative. Like, you got to find things like this. You got to, you know, like, maybe it's getting involved in your church. Maybe it's giving back to, you know, not even in an athlete setting, you know, just giving back to younger girls and just, you know, the things that you deal with on a daily basis, just outside of athletics, you know? And then the other thing that I did want to briefly touch on before we kind of bring this all to a close was just body image and stuff, because we're going to have a whole episode on this, because we both have a lot to say on this topic, a lot of different directions that we can take this one. But like, I know, being, you know, a former athlete, and I know Danielle struggled with this too, of just trying to find enough and trying to, you know, do what feels good, as opposed to bringing your body to like the point of death every single day, you know. So that's definitely like a point of, you know, struggle, I think, in the post-athlete life. But like I said too, you know, a couple of minutes ago, it's not that serious. Like, you know, I know it's so easy to like go on social media or look at your teammates or something like that and think like, oh man, you know, I wish I was like that lean, or I wish I looked like that. Like, but at the end of the day, like, somebody is always going to look at you and think that they had something of yours. And you're always going to look at somebody else and think that you have something of theirs. And so I just, you know, I firmly believe comparison is the thief of joy, and you can't come to terms with who you are and this new stage of your life when you're, you know, focusing on somebody else or wishing that you are somebody else, you know?
Yeah, and to that, I just feel like when I was in sports, there obviously, like through school and through coaches, there are so many means of support for athletes when you're right in the middle of it. I feel like not as many people talk about like the what happens after. We all just kind of like float off into the distance,
Right.
like dust. So it's super cool to be talking about that. And yeah, I don't want to touch too much on what you just sprinkled out there, because I mean, that could be like a whole nother thing. It's just, yeah, it's definitely hard. And just know that there are people that are feeling the same thing as you and who are going through it. Yeah, I feel like I can't comment on I don't want to talk too much on what you just talked about. I'll go off on like another 20-minute tangent.
Trust, we're going to have a whole episode on that, because we have so many stories and so many things to share. Honestly, like, as we're kind of transitioning out of this discussion, like, we're going to have so many random ass episodes, excuse my language, but like we have a lot of things like that are substantial that we need to discuss, but there's also things that I think Danielle and I like should talk about, just because we can't make them up. You know, like, we were texting about something last night. It was like some interaction that we'd had with this like mutual guy, something or other. And it's just one of those like wild stories that like we have to tell somebody. And if like nobody appreciates, and I feel like they need to be somewhere. So we're gonna have,
there's always a light, and like there's always a life lesson from it. You know, we're not just gonna like tell you about it and like talk crap
and just trauma dump. No. That's my one goal. Like, we're not gonna be on here talking crap, even though we could. We're not going to be on here talking crap. I don't want to drag anybody through the mud. I don't want to drag anybody through the mud, but just know,
gravel.
Just know, like, the stories and the things that we have lived individually and together cannot be made up.
Katie and I, like she said in the beginning, we went through a little bit of a gap of not talking. Again, there was no reason for that. We were both just
literally none,
living our life. But the things that her and I have experienced,
yep,
in these last 2 years, 2 years,
2.5. It was August of 22.
Yeah, are like enough for a lifetime.
Yeah,
like they could be a whole movie. So,
And this is what, in all honesty, this is why the whole podcast discussion started, because like we would get on, you know, the phone and I'd be telling her these things and she'd be like, oh my God, like we need to start a podcast. Like this is like some Alex Earl type, you know, whatever. And like Alex, we love you. Literally, we love you. We love hotness. So we are doing our best to live up to your standard. But yes, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you stayed till the end, I know this was like a big fat discussion. But say bye to Danielle. She'll be back at some point. And yeah, have a great rest of your weekend and a very, very happy new year.
Happy New Year 2025.